to our presentations today, I wanted to give you kind of a high-level overview of where we're headed. So this is our roadmap for our time together. And again, I'm not quite sure what the official end date is going to be. It's just going to depend on how quick or how slow we move through all these various topics. So you'll notice these past couple of weeks, we've just been doing seemingly random miscellaneous stuff. It's all related to identity, but there's no real flow to it. And you're exactly right. So I've been picking off kind of the easy, low-hanging fruit concepts that won't hurt your brain too much. And then later this week, or maybe it's early next week, I don't even remember at the moment, we are going to start looking at SAML just at a high level. We're not going to deep dive into SAML yet. So basically, going to learn just enough about it so you know what's going on. And then we'll do the same thing with OAuth. And then we're going to do the same thing with OpenID, because OpenID kind of takes SAML and OAuth and combines them together. So once we get the overview of those three concepts, we're going to start doing really going deep into single sign-on, doing hands-on configuration with different single sign-on options. That'll give you some great experience with actually using SAML. Then we're going to go into everybody's favorite topic, OAuth flows, and we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of all those different flows that the folks that have taken the exam before said we need to know those flows. So we're going to do that next. And then once we're comfortable with single sign-on and OAuth and how they work in Salesforce proper, so to speak, then we'll take those same concepts, we'll apply them to configuring communities. And then after that, whatever's left over, we'll take a look at the study guide. And if there's things we haven't covered at that point, then we'll clean those up at the end. So again, thanks for coming along for the ride, and we will get into the presentations. And today's presenters, we have Terry, David, Jeff, Svatka, Paulina, and Brenda. I don't know if we're going to get through all 6 of these today. We'll just kind of see how it goes. If we don't get to everybody, we will move the leftover sessions to the following session, and then we'll just kind of shift things down as we need to. So to give our presenters the most amount of time to do their thing, I'm going to stop presenting, and Terry, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Okay, and can you see my screen?
I can, yes. And Terry, just feel free to pick on anybody that's in the meeting and have them try to answer the question first, because we're an equal opportunity pointer.
Well, in presentation mode, I don't see who the people are. So
well,
I might struggle with doing that. All right, so I've got quite a few questions here. So if we need to skip some of them, just tell me when to shut up, and we'll that'll be just fine.
That's fine.
All right, Salesforce Authenticator is available for all editions of Salesforce. Is that true or false?
John, what do you think? John Daniel. John, you're muted.
Yeah, remember to unmute.
Yeah. John is being the steadiest, silent, and quiet, silent type. Satish, how about you? What do you think? Is Salesforce Authenticator for all editions of Salesforce?
I think it's false, but again, I might be cheating.
Okay. I feel like it might be true. Okay, well, there we go. It's true.
That one is true. It's available for all editions.
Bummer.
Okay.
All right, next, when enabling two-factor authentication, it must be deployed to all users.
Svatka, what do you think?
Well, I know you probably don't need to take it, because at my company we tried it and not everybody had to sign up. So I would say it's false.
Yeah, it is false. So we set up a permission set and roll it out to, or it's recommended to roll it out to a pilot group first. So permission sets help us control who receives it.
Very cool. David, you're on next to answer this.
All right. What are the this one's a little tough. So I don't know if I expect somebody to know this one off the top, but we can talk through it anyway. What's the recommended steps for rolling out two-factor authentication?
That's right, David. Oh, David is.
Well, as you just said, to roll it out as a pilot group. But to sort of like, since I'm doing the next quiz, I know this sounds strange, but aren't we supposed to like give people choices?
Yeah. This is more of a flashcard type.
Exams. For quizzes, it's literally flashcard type stuff.
Oh, okay. So I did quiz on mine. All right.
I've
So
got some of those too. It's coming.
okay. Yeah. Set up as a pilot group.
Yeah.
Permission says, yeah.
Yeah. Plan and test, and that's where they're talking about considering a pilot group and communicating the upcoming changes. The second step was to provide supporting materials, and so that's getting users instructions on how to pair the authenticator with Salesforce, and then frequently asked questions, and then preparing your help desk with how to help users when they run into some challenges. And then the third one was to execute and support. Any questions on those?
Well, I don't have a question on this specifically, and I would love to hear from anybody in the group on this. And I know this is like different. This is like installing the Authenticator app, but I thought like the basic thing where like Salesforce sends you a verification code through your email or through your mobile device. I thought that was two-factor authentication. So what's the difference between the basic thing that Salesforce does for any new user versus this kind of two-factor authentication?
So we just did this. I'll jump in here. What Salesforce does looks at whether your device or the particular IP you came on or something specific happened that it's not seen for you before, and that's when it will send you the second factor. But once you've registered your device, then it doesn't necessarily require you to do it anymore through the basic what they give you, and that's why there's different ways you can turn it on if you want every single login to be two-factor versus just coming off of a new machine, a new browser, or something else. I think the new machine and the new browser are kind of what Salesforce has baked in as part of the flow.
Yeah.
So, and just to add to that, the first time when you receive your email to verify your account, what Salesforce is doing is identity verification. When you have the two-factor authentication, is authenticating you into the system. So one is identity verification, the other is authentication. The second one is going to be, as he said, every time from then on that you start logging into the platform.
Okay, so even if your device address is in the trusted IP list, even if you're on a device you've done before, with two-factor authentication, you have to do that every time? Is that the difference?
No,
yes.
Yeah, the two-factor is always, but the verification is at certain points. Salesforce might ask you to verify your authentic.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That was very helpful.
And just, Natalya, this is John. Sorry about earlier, but my mic was all kinds of screw up. The difference to your question is actually what they refer to as the difference between device authentication versus policy authentication.
Okay.
And so that's a point that I was touching on last week.
Okay. Thank you, guys. This is why I love working in a group. Everybody has additional information to share. Okay, moving.
All right, two-factor authentication provides no additional security value for organizations using single sign-on. True or false?
Vinayak, we're going to have you answer this one. What do you think? True or false? Let's see if he can get to his mic. Nope. Okay, Madhavi, how about you?
This is false. So it still provides you additional security, right? So on your phone, you still need to confirm the login, but then am I guessing here?
Well, is the question slightly misleading?
It kind
Yeah,
of.
it is.
I was thinking that too with the double negative.
Because where are you putting the two-factor authentication? On the single sign on the identity provider of the SSO, or are you putting it on the Salesforce side?
And can you even do that? Can you have single sign-on through another identity provider? And
Oh,
then
absolutely.
For the two-factor on Salesforce.
Yeah, we can put it on the
Absolutely.
Salesforce side.
Well,
Right.
you can only put it on the Salesforce side if you're using Salesforce as the identity provider.
Yeah.
So this is the one where I was struggling too. I had a question. So in our company, we implemented the mobile app. We rolled it out. We have our own ID provider, SSO. And there's this policy on the connected app where you can enable 2FA. And I did not know, back then I didn't know about the Authenticator So there was definitely no issue in logging on. So that's why I wanted to check with John, see if somebody has actually implemented this in the mobile scenario, the connected app scenario. Has somebody had an experience with this where you could actually have a SSO and enable a two-factor, and it will still push you for a second factor?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was headed with this, is that the single sign-on, while is nice and that it does add some security value, the two-factor still adds additional security. And I see I have a misspelling there in my answer, but so yeah, I had this as false.
Okay.
Because it could add additional value.
Yeah. So I was, John, I was checking documentation on this, and I added a link to your Excel sheet. But personally, I maybe touch base offline if anybody has any experience with this to figure out how to make this work.
Well, the nice part is when we get into the single sign-on hands-on deep dive, when we all will be configuring single sign-on, I'm going to add this as a task to see if you can set somebody other than Salesforce as your identity provider and still require two-factor authentication. So you will get to personally see how it all works.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Our multiple choice questions now.
Oh, okay.
ABC company is wanting to implement two-factor authentication. They want a single solution they can deploy to all their enterprise applications and users. They have a mix of both iOS and Android mobile devices. The solution needs to work when users log on to their mobile device. They only want to require two-factor when not connected to their internal network. As our consultant, which of the options would you present to them that meets all of their requirements? Select two. This from my memory of the exam was a pretty typical type question.
Okay, but this wasn't the actual question, right? Because we don't want to get in
No,
trouble with our Salesforce people. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the actual questions, but yeah. This was common.
Yeah, this looks like a typical exam question. Lots of details in the question and lots of answers that look like they could be right. So rather than picking on anyone, Terry Miller, I would say walk us through what the key words in the question are that will drive us to the right answers.
Yeah, so to me, key there is that the two different mobile devices. So that Salesforce Authenticator works with iOS and Android. So that makes A possible for that piece. The solution needs to work with mobile devices. So when they log on to a mobile device, it also needs to work there. The one piece that kind of makes me question if I have the right response to this is that they want to deploy it for all enterprise applications. And so I'll show you what I had put down as the answer. I used A and B, but I think A might be wrong with that first requirement there, that it needs to be available for all enterprise applications. Any thoughts from everybody on that?
Why do you think that may be?
I wasn't sure if the Salesforce Authenticator could be used with other corporate apps.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know if Salesforce Authenticator supports the other enterprise applications in your organization, right?
Yeah, that's where I was thinking that I might have this wrong as I was looking at it again this morning.
It can't.
Well, think about it though. I mean, if Salesforce is the IP, then anybody, Microsoft Word, Google, whomever you're using has to go to the IP of Salesforce to do it. And then Salesforce is going to verify it in that particular org. And if they have 2FA turned on there, why wouldn't it be used?
Yeah, I was thinking that too, because one of the things we'll see later is where we're using Salesforce to launch all of the other enterprise applications, and so we could, in theory, use both A and B. So everybody first logs into Salesforce and then launches from the app launcher into the other corporate applications.
Yeah, because it's my understanding that Salesforce Authenticator and TOTPs and stuff like that are all about the verification of your identity against the IP. It's not so much should you have access to Salesforce.
Oh.
And 2FA in general is all about verifying your identity. Now, whoever the IP is going to handle that, and so it makes sense that whoever's handling the identity verification could also institute 2FA at that point. So yeah,
Right.
in that thought, then yeah, you could use it across the enterprise if Salesforce was the IP.
Okay. And if Salesforce is not the IP, and by IP, just to be clear, you're saying the identity
IDP,
provider.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, IDP. You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so if the identity provider is Salesforce, we don't think there's an issue with this approach. If the identity provider is not Salesforce, they would need to support the Salesforce Authenticator for the two-factor work, or we might have to use something like Google Authenticator instead.
Right.
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on, Terry.
The Salesforce Authenticator app shows the user which of the following pieces of information. Select 4.
So only one isn't right. Okay.
Yeah, only one is not right here. It actually shows more than what I have here as options, but one is wrong.
Yeah. Well, I know I've seen username on the Authenticator app because I've enabled Lightning login for myself on some orgs, and I know I see the username coming across. And I think I see the location. What about anybody else used this before? What are the other options?
I think the device. I thought
IP is not.
C.
it shows the device OS and type, I guess.
Okay, so then A and D are the only ones we're not sure of. Or did somebody say type of device?
I don't think it shows the IP address.
It does show the IP. I think it doesn't show.
Yeah, it doesn't show the IP. It shows you a location, but not an IP address.
Oh, okay.
Yay, one for the West Coast.
Yeah, well, that would make sense though, because not everybody can verify the exact IP address. Because a lot of times you're coming from a corporate firewall, or even if you're coming from AT&T, they're going to mask their internal IPs versus the public IP that they send internet traffic on.
Yeah. All right, Salesforce Authenticator is available for which of the following mobile devices? Select 2. I kind of gave this one away.
A and C.
Windows in BlackBerry.
Yeah, it's A and C is correct.
Very cool.
Which of the following are reasons for implementing two-factor authentication? A, to prevent access by terminated employees, to prevent phishing, reduce vulnerabilities. A and B, or B and C?
Well, A,
But F?
deactivating the user. You should be deactivating the user to prevent access, so it's not A.
Yeah. Agree. It's B and C.
Yeah, B and C. All right, Salesforce supports high assurance sessions for which of the following actions? I like these questions, they're kind of easy.
I know reports and dashboards is on there. I have no idea about any of the others.
E.
E.
Yeah, it's E. It's all the above. There's actually even a few more.
All right.
Universal Containers has set up two-factor authentication, but users are complaining about constantly having to do the two-factor when they connect from home. What steps can you recommend to these users to reduce the number of times they go through two-factor authentication? Select 1.
So if you want employees,
Natalya, I think this was one.
Yeah, this was one of mine. And let's make this the last one so we can move on to the others. So after the discussion earlier today about, Salesforce cooked in authentication versus this, I don't even know if this is right or not, but I think it is.
you need to enable location services so that you can automatically let the users log in, and at any time you can revert that permission back again.
Yep. C is the correct answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Terry. I love how you did these slides, and the people that are going to be watching these recordings afterwards are going to be very happy with this as well. All right. Thanks, Terry. We're on to David then for My Domain.
And we're trying to do PowerPoint. Yay, 2 screens. I decided to have a little bit of fun because it's 5 in the morning for me. So this should look familiar to everybody.
Oh, yes.
And that should look familiar to everybody. I had to keep it in there because that's a running joke. I do not work for Salesforce. So I do have a sense of humor, and hopefully will shine up through here.
And you even have the forward-looking statement, looks like.
Yes, I put the forward-looking statement in there. So the very first one is Universal Containers. Our famous company wants to implement single sign-on for their users. What are the requirements that are needed to accomplish this? Option 1 is always the best option.
David, your slides aren't advancing.
Ah, damn it.
You might just be sharing like your main window and not your presentation.
I try to share the whole I had this damn dual monitor crap. How to hide presenter view. What are you seeing now?
We'll just see your PowerPoint file with all the slides on the left and just the first slide front and center.
How about we'll do it this way? Can you see it now?
Nope, still just the PowerPoint. There we go.
There you
go. Okay.
You want to go to, yeah, I can see now.
All right, we'll just do it this way because dual monitors is freaking out Google presentations.
Yeah, I've had that happen on my work computer where it like wouldn't share.
Okay. So Universal Containers wants to implement single sign-on for their users. What are the requirements that are needed to accomplish this? Option 1 is always the best option. And option 4 is a good reality. So choose people.
Well, I'd say number 2.
There you go. Okay. I promise you will laugh a lot during this.
Oh, good. Especially the West Coast people need that laughter.
I needed it too. Universal Containers users fed the system admin with red vines to get single sign-on going. The system admin is building a document to facilitate this. What are the requirements that are needed to accomplish this?
Hard-coded URLs.
And being
I like
going
option
the old.
2.
I'm going to go with 1 and 3. I don't think having a snazzy snappy graphics is necessary. Oh, the Twizzlers, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. So actually, it could be 1, 3, and 4. There's something cool, ironically, is in the documentation. That's what they used for suggesting for My Domain.
Nice.
And it's says it's like, oh wow, this is kind of funny. They recommended something cool.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. The graphics are not required, but if you're facilitating a document, you might want to go ahead and start working with them to get the assets that you're going to be using.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
is Ninja mode beyond the scope of this study group? Is that what's
yes, it is. Okay, so Universal Containers users are running around with their hair on fire, which is typical. They gave the admin Krispy Kreme donuts, Red Vines, Twizzlers, and an Amazon gift card. They came in and nothing is working. What happened?
Nothing's working for SSO. Nobody can log in, or Salesforce itself is just down.
Their users are screaming. You got to figure this out.
Oh, and they just say nothing is working. Yeah, this sounds like a typical user. It doesn't work. My Salesforce.
Exactly. Their hair's on fire.
Oh, let's see.
Well, I would say 1 could be.
Yeah, or number 4. And if they bookmarked login.salesforce.com and now you've turned on My Domain and you forced it to go to the domain name. If they saw a warning, I don't think they'd be screaming quite as much.
Okay. So 1, 2, 4, 5 are possibly correct ones. This one's sort of me being a little bit of a jerk because users are lazy, and this is all about bookmarks. The reason why generally their hair will catch on fire is because they clicked on a bookmark to go somewhere and it doesn't work. So everything's gonna be related to a bookmark. Those are all bookmark questions.
Okay.
Okay. Universal Containers admin got a message from the people who signed the front of the check. They want to know if the new role of the super cool domain is successful. How can the admin tell them it's successful or not? I think option 1 was kind of a good one. Just,
Yeah. Contact the SF dev, ask for a SOCL report. I don't
Number 3. Number 3.
It is number 3. But technically you could do number 2. And it'd be stupid though, but 3 is right there. And you can also dump reports out in CSV formats, and therefore you can do whatever you want to do to show it to them.
how would just looking at login history tell you that my domain was successful?
Because what happens is you get a report of where people logged in from,
Mm-hmm.
and you can dump that out as a CSV and then pull it into wherever you want. You can see the user and where they logged in from.
But I mean, will it say like the mydomain.my.force.com?
Right. Yes.
on the
Yes. Instead of saying login.salesforce.com, it'll say super cool domain.
Gotcha. I would have just said look in the URL of in Salesforce and see if it's got the domain name as part of the URL when you're logged in.
Well, yeah, but you need a report.
Yeah, you need a report so that you can find out all the 1,000 people that are. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Wants to test a my domain concept. I need more donuts. All right, Winnie, we haven't heard from you. What do you think?
You actually did hear from me. I was just wrong earlier.
You got a 50-50 shot unless you want to go for the donuts.
Yes.
Winnie says yes, I think.
Okay, it's a technical weird yes. The documentation says no, but the reality is it is a yes. So when you do set up my domain for a regular instance or in a sandbox, you get a full 40 characters. When you use a developer org to test, you get 34 characters and it appends -dev-ed to it, to your super cool domain. I don't know if that's going to be on a quiz, but they tend to ask weird questions like what version stuff works in. So.
Oh, I know. I had one where it's like, what are the file limits for this particular thing? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Google.com.
Yeah. You can't use that on an exam.
Yes. Okay.
That will terminate your exam very quickly.
So I got tired of using universal containers, so they were now bought by Widgets Inc. The new owners want to change the my domain. What steps does the admin need to follow to implement this?
I don't think you can do that, can you?
Can't.
Yeah, you can.
Unless Salesforce can do it. Can Salesforce support change?
No, you can change it as of it's either, I think it's winter 19.
Oh yeah,
he is correct.
With the exception of developer edition orgs, the enterprise and unlimited edition and all those bigger orgs can change the domain, and it's admin control. You don't need to get Salesforce support involved.
Correct.
Oh,
Yep. So 1 is correct for all orgs other than dev, and 3 is correct for dev org.
wow, cool.
Okay, and this is, we have to do this.
Change all bookmarks, right?
Yes, and I tell them to update their bookmarks so they don't run around with their hair on fire again.
Yes, and this quiz was sponsored by Krispy Kreme, Red Vine, Twizzlers, and Amazon. And thank you.
Wow, thanks, David. That was a nice little wake up for early in the morning. All right, Jeff. Enough with the fun already. Let's talk about licenses, everybody's favorite topic, because licenses are so clear-cut with Salesforce.
Oh, yes, they are. All right. License types and identity. You guys can hear me, correct?
Yes, we can hear you and
go.
your PowerPoint deck.
All right, sounds good. Let me actually get into display mode, make it easier here. And I kind of went all different directions when I started doing this, so it may seem like it's scattered around a little bit, but hopefully we'll get to the bottom line of what we need to get here. I guess the high-level summary is access to objects, number of objects, tabs, apps, features, all kinds of different things are controlled by an innumerable number of licenses and variations of those licenses. And kind of my next point there is no matter where you look, the set of what you see is probably going to be obsolete. And really the only way to understand this in detail is to ask Salesforce if you have a specific thing you need to do, because as you're looking through the documentation, you'll see, well, here's what it used to be called. Now it's changed to this. Now it's a combination of other things. So, I mean, there's just numerous ways that Salesforce can use to kind of control what you get access to. Most of those license types actually give you a specific user that you're authenticating into a person that can then go and do other things. But there are some of them that are just kind of like a general specific feature, and I'll touch on those a little bit more. Kind of the overall control is categorized in a couple of different sets of things. There's just your basic user licenses. So, and we'll get into a lot more detail. We'll get into some detail there as much as people want to cover. I've got a lot of information on that, but that's just whether you bought, Salesforce as its own Salesforce service, Salesforce sales, community licenses, platform licenses, just that type of specific user attached to type stuff. But there's also things that can be associated through permission sets. So you can buy certain items that you're not necessarily buying a specific user for, but you're buying a number of things that someone can have. Let me back up a bit. With user licenses, you can have one and only one. So every user has to have some type of license. So that's kind of where the next things come in is, let's say you've got a particular license, but you need some added functionality or added features. They can be distributed either through permission set licenses that allow you to add additional features, just like it says, through a permission set. Examples of this can be some of the managed apps, event monitoring, if you have Shield or any of those things, access to Wave. These are things that, if you look in your user section down below the actual permission set, you'll have a set of things that say permission set licensing. There's also yet another thing called feature licenses, which is slightly different than the permission set licenses. This, again, adds extra things you can do on top of, let's say, the base license level that you've got, not necessarily added through permission sets, but these might be added, let's say, when you're doing a managed package and there's a different set of licenses that are associated with that, you can go through the package itself and assign particular features. These are things like chatter answers, lightning platform flow, knowledge, live agent. And then there's usage-based entitlements. So this is yet another way that kind of falls into two categories. These are things that either you buy a certain number of licenses to a community, which is usually a monthly type of, you get 50 logins a month, 50 users a month, or there's maybe things that are categorized around a number of records. So let's say you purchased data.com, which is going away, but that was one of the things that you purchase 2,000, 4,000, 5,000, whatever it is. That's kind of a set limit. Once you reach your 5,000, you're done. With the login, with the first type, the monthly is every month that recycles, and you get a brand new set of items. They don't carry over what you had from the month before, but you get a new set. You bought 50 community licenses. Beginning of February, you get 50 new ones. Anything on kind of the different types of things that you can assign access to? Again, features, specific objects, number of objects, certain activities within Salesforce, all through these different mechanisms. And then we'll kind of dive more into some of the user licenses, because that's kind of more specific. Permission sets and features, it's hard to get a lot of stuff because those can be so varied, but licenses kind of user licenses fit into a couple categories.
Yeah, no questions here. Just a request as you're going through your remainder slides, if you could really focus in on how licenses affect login options and identity options, and just kind of laser focus on that portion of it.
Okay, and hopefully that I have some of that. If not, we can kind of redress those after I go through. And I'm going to go through the rest of these quick because there's a lot of information here. The slides will be out there to look, and I also built a kind of a spreadsheet that has some more controls, because I wasn't sure exactly what we were trying to get to with this. So let me start in. We'll see if that helps us get in there. So.
Okay. Yeah, the study guide just said something about know what license types are available for different identity options and different login options.
Okay, and I probably don't have much in terms of that. I'll look real quick. So licenses divide up into standard, users, chatter, community, service cloud, sites, and authenticated websites. I'm trying to think if I've got most of what I have around the license all lead into restrictions around what objects you can see, what items you can see, not necessarily into logins. The one, I guess in general, maybe we can just open this up for discussion because I may not have then what we're looking for is for most of all of these, it has a specific user that you log in, like we're normally thinking of, give your credentials, and then you're that user to get access to specific pieces. The one area where that is different is when you're talking about the, now where did I put that?
I think it was on the bottom of your last slide, your special cases.
Yes, it's the, so one of the items you can get is just identity internal, well, we'll just call it identity and identity external. So you can get from, when we talked about Salesforce being your IDP, you can set up to where every one of your employees has an identity license. They don't have a full Salesforce license. They can't get to anything within Salesforce, but you can now use Salesforce as your identity provider to all your other systems to get into. So this is where we kind of talked about Salesforce being your IDP. You don't have to pay for a full license to get into some of your other actions if they don't get into Salesforce, but that is available. And then the identity external, same type of thing, but you could allow your customers that, or partners or whatever else who are coming to your applications, they can also have specific IDs to have Salesforce be your identity provider for people that are outside. Again, they would, whatever your application is, it would come over to Salesforce first to find out who the person is, pass that identity back, and allow them to log into the specific action.
I'm sorry, Jeff, that's what I remember was on questions like that.
There's one use case where you can have Salesforce as a ID provider, Salesforce IDP, and you might have an Active Directory, in the company that you want to synchronize with, right? Isn't there a requirement where users have to have a Salesforce IDP Connect license? Something that we can follow up on.
Right, and I think that has to do with these identity items.
Right. I thought Identity Connect came with those special licenses, the identity and identity external.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that the identity trailhead talks about, you just get Identity Connect with your Salesforce license.
Right. Yeah, and that's the type of questions that I remember being on the exam. There wasn't very many of them from what I remember on licenses, but
right. The other one that is not logging in as a specific person has to do with sites.
Yeah.
So there's the guest user on sites that you buy a certain number of guest users. You can then create one site per each of those guest users, and everybody that comes into that takes on that same guest user. So it's kind of like a general site, come and get information, do specific things. You're not identifying as an individual, you're just identifying as the ability to come in. It's more tied to being able to set up the site than it is to an actual user identity.
Right. Isn't that around, whether you have a community license or an external license, whether you could just register and you have access to a limited set of stuff versus if you have a community license, you can do more than just register.
Correct. And communities and sites can work together. So you can have either or, but they can also be combined. And I think like access to the public pages of communities, you can then get to through this guest user site. But you could have a community, which is all specific logins that then doesn't have any access. But if you set up a public area within that community, then your site's guest users could also get access to those public pages. Let me see if I've got. So this is where I was talking about. They used to have a chart, and this is probably more detail than we want to get to then if we're really looking at how you log in. This chart isn't really available anymore. I looked through several different blogs. They all said, hey, we used to be able to look at what you could get to, which now just seems to be buried within text. And that's the link that I've got within the pages. They'll kind of explain all the stuff that's in a nice chart. It now is just kind of laid out in pages and pages of text. And the other thing I will include, but again, it's probably, I can't. Oh yeah, I can. It's probably more than we want to get to with this thing. Is I kind of built a chart that explains particular type of licenses. Whether it's internal, external types of things you get access to, but that's probably overkill for what they want here on getting in.
But for those of us that work for consulting partners, this would be an awesome resource, and also for anyone sharing for the sharing and visibility exam, this could be this is a really good resource for the sharing exam.
Okay, I'll put both of these in the docs area.
Yeah, and post it in the Trailblazer community as well, because that's an amazing amount of work. And I remember studying for sharing and going, okay, who can see what and when, and what kind of license do you need for that? And this would have been great to have.
And it's, you look at all the communities, and there's such a small difference between each of the community types.
Yeah.
You know, you really have to go back and say, why am I getting this one versus the other one? They might add 1 or 2 more features. You know, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, add a date to that, Jeff, because it changes tomorrow.
Exactly.
And you might want to clean up A5. It's external, not external.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, just missing an L there. So,
Well, it's also missing Twizzler content, but still.
yeah.
Well, I like you.
Mine had more coffee than Twizzler, so.
Yeah, kudos for adding the other 2 license types that just came up in summer for communities. I mean, communities had 3 types for the longest. Now they're at the additional 2, and I'm hearing about a 3rd one coming out pretty soon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we're gonna go from 3 to 6 like this. So nice work.
Good thing we took the sharing exam earlier.
No kidding.
It was 6. So what about cost? Do you know, anybody know like what an identity license costs?
I don't.
No, the default answer there is talk to your 8.
I know, but I mean, for licenses, they publish kind of standard costs. So professional edition, the sticker price is $75 a user. Enterprise $150 a user. I'm just wondering if they list prices for identity, or if it's kind of like communities where you really have to talk to the sales rep to get a number.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not even requested.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because the number immediately goes to pot as soon as you talk to the AE, and it's just cut the middleman out. It goes straight to the AE.
Yeah.
I know that there was no question about pricing on the exam.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect there to be, just because the pricing is so fluid and the license editions are so fluid, but more of a general interest question there. All right, Jeff, anything else on here we need to know? But yeah, this will be a fantastic resource for anybody preparing for sharing and visibility.
Sounds good.
All right. Just for timekeeping purposes, Paulina and Brenda, we're very likely going to move you to Wednesday. If you're not able to present on Wednesday, please let me know, and I'll see if I can do some schedule shifting. But we will have time for Svatka. So Svatka, you are up with IDP versus SP. Svatka, you might be muted. We see your slides, but we don't hear you. There you are.
So you missed my joke, my donuts joke.
Oh,
man.
Good.
I was trying to say I almost added donuts to my front slide and then I pulled them out. So, and I'm on the East Coast, so. And I thought it was pretty early this morning with Terry and all his questions. That was like really sharp, like too fast for me. All right, so I thought that we would kind of start very simple. So those terms, they're very close to each other. So maybe just break it out a little bit for those that are just starting to learn. IDP, Identity Provider, is the system that holds the credentials. Could be username and passcode. It could be a couple other things. I think we just talked about 2FA and other things, right? So think about it as IDP as the system, the source of truth for maintaining identity for your users. Whereas service provider is, and this is a Salesforce definition, website that hosts apps and can be defined as SAML connected, enabled connected apps. I also thought it would be really good this morning to just add SAML. It's an XML-based protocol for single sign-on. And then I was trying to wrap it together and kind of was thinking the same along the side, like what are we trying to achieve here? So as I was going through some of my future slides, I was trying to tie them together. So when I see a single sign-on and thinking about benefits and the reasons why users, IDP, and SP kind of come together. Also thinking about SSO single sign-on being as an integration pattern. It truly does transmit information from point A to point B. Now, a couple of the benefits, reduce admin costs. We were talking about perhaps identifying one source of location for identity. So majority of the enterprise companies have this. Some of the smaller companies probably don't. An interesting metric that I found, 5 to 20 seconds per login. That's a big one to actually go and lobby for something like IDP out there. As far as adoption, increased adoption, and the offboarding, I think Natalya was talking about the offboarding. So it should be in a centralized place. It shouldn't really be in more than one place. And so this is the sort of basic slide that shows a little bit of that connections in terms of having IDP on one side and service provider on the other. And so this is the one that kind of looks like the corporate identity for employees. We have our IDP, which could be Active Directory. It is not Salesforce in this case. And then number of different, well, in this case, one service provider. But this is probably more of a representation of what we will see in our ecosystem, right? We're going to have an IDP that connects to many different types of systems. And so there's, we know that there are those two types, but then how do we look around, to actually execute on those, or how does the information points moves from point A to point B? So thinking about maybe the service-based, which this one looks like identity-based, but imagine we flipped it and you're logging in into Salesforce first. And so you're coming in as a user here and looking at this cloud here, and you're trying to log in. So at the first step, you're going to go and probably reach a website, a Salesforce page. And then if SSO is enabled on Salesforce, Salesforce will say, hey, I can't really just go and prompt you for username and passcode, because that means that the IDP is most likely going to be authenticating for us here. So as a second step, Salesforce hands off to the IDP to authenticate the user. The IDP and Salesforce have trust relationships, which I'll get to in a minute, to Salesforce, so that Salesforce trusts the IDP, authenticates the users, and passes the assertion of a user identity back to Salesforce. So we start over here. We go and ask the IDP, say, hey, do you know this user? And they either say yes or no, and they basically give you the go-ahead, right, in simple terms. One thing that I was just thinking out loud about was, well, how do they know to trust me? Like, how do you actually develop this trust, right? Can't be just because I say so, although it'd be nice. But so there is this whole setup in terms of public keys. So an IDP will set up a public key certificate that can be actually downloaded and uploaded to the service provider. And so when they send the SAML assertion back, they actually send the key back with the SAML assertion, and you can say, okay, we know who you are, so we can trust you because we actually have those, the set of keys here. So then I was thinking about, let's make it a little harder to think about, because it's really too easy to look at IDP as being this other entity than Salesforce. So why don't we make it more fun this morning and look at a bunch of Salesforce clouds here? So I think we already heard about a couple different use case scenarios where the IDP could be a Salesforce instance, and you could have many other Salesforce instances as service providers. And so the IDP initiated flow is as Salesforce, the user tries to log in, right? They send a response to the service provider. Natalya, take a look at my slide. Do I have the right IDP slide here on the right-hand side? I think I do.
I don't know. I only see one slide. I don't see like a right hand, left hand.
Okay. Well, it technically works pretty much the same, just half of the steps that I actually mentioned a second time, because the original one, we were basically going through a service provider trying to go to the identity. This one kind of cuts half of the trips, right? Mm-hmm. It's just you go from identity, which could be kind of like, and I'm thinking out loud here, imagine that you log into your intranet, right? Not necessarily Salesforce IDP per se, and you're looking at a number of different tabs, and then you click on it, it will basically send a response and enable to log in. And so I wanted to outline, I was studying yesterday and looking at a couple different things. Dreamforce just published their recordings for a lot of different sessions that were at Dreamforce. I didn't see this one when I was out there, but I thought that one was a really good one. So I'm sharing the link down here for the recording, and it had a couple different methods by which it would actually authenticate, or a couple different use cases, if you will. And this one actually shows the Salesforce being IDP as well as service providers. What do you do where? So you would configure the IDP, the Salesforce as an IDP, you would enable it, you would use the Federation ID, you would then go ahead and enable single sign-on on a service provider. Then you go back and actually create a connected apps. And don't forget to actually then configure that certificate, bring that certificate from the IDP to SP, and then you can do some just-in-time provisioning. So this was another view that sort of gave me that visual, okay, how does one side works with the other? How do they trust each other? How do they communicate? And just in case people are not that confused just yet, did you actually have more than one IDP? I mean, really? This one was a really good use case, okay? I don't know if those are on an exam. I haven't taken it yet, but there is such a thing that you could have a multiple IDP, because maybe you have one IDP per partner or per division or per region. Has anyone actually seen this one? I was going to open this one for the team. Have you guys seen this before?
Yes, we have two IDPs. One being for, as we're coming in through the web, we have one IDP. If we're coming in through mobile, we have a second. So whenever you do your server initiated, you have to choose here which one you want to do. If you do an IDP initiated, you can get around having to see the screen because you can go to whichever IDP first you want to identify it. But if you're doing server initiated, you have to pick which one you want to use.
Right, so they're right over here on the right-hand side.
Your social sign-ons for your community would use that as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. People might want to use, their Instagram account or their Twitter account or their Facebook account to create a community user. Even Trailhead, you can log in with Google Plus or LinkedIn or Salesforce.
So we just need a little spreadsheet for our brain to remember how we logged into which with what, right? I mean, it's just getting a little too complicated. Those are my references for everybody to use, that I use, so you guys can actually enjoy all the fun studies I have enjoyed as well.
Wow. Svatka, can you add those links on the resource sheet as well?
I will.
Thank you. Any questions here on IDPs versus SPs? And again, Paulina and Brenda, we will move you to Wednesday. If for some reason you won't be able to make Wednesday, just let me know. Thank you, Svatka. I'm going to bring my slide deck back up now just to close out the session. Thank you for everybody for awesome presentations. So just a few reminders. I will post this slide on all future main deck slides, so you always have an easy link to the resources that are available to you. The study and presentation schedule, it is very fluid, so just keep that in mind. Constantly changing, I'm constantly shifting things around, adding things. And as you folks add things to the resources tab, I might throw some of those links into the study plan as well. The resources guide, this is where you get to contribute your flashcards, your quizzes, your mock exam questions. Whether you're the quizmaster or not, if you can think of a question as you're studying, please add it to the list. The slide deck folder, a lot of you have already made use of that to put your slide decks in there. And then, of course, the meeting recordings. We'll also be working with Gemma to post these through Ladies Be Architects for other people to view. And for next session, the Wednesday's presenters list is going to shift. Again, we're going to take the last two presenters from today, put them on Wednesday, and we'll shift some of these off as well. Hands-on practice. You get to set up temporary two-factor authentication verification codes this week. So set up two-factor auth. Again, do it in a dev org, in a sandbox. Don't do it to your production users because they will hate you and run around with their hair on fire. And the rest of the links are here for you to review. They're also on the study plan. So again, Edith and Satish, I would plan on presenting the Monday after Thanksgiving, and we'll move, I can't remember who we had for the session security, but we'll move those to Wednesday. And then let's see, the remaining slides are just repeats from previous sessions. If you need them for reference, I'm just always going to put these in here so you know what you're supposed to prepare. Also, as you're preparing for your assigned questions, check out the study guide and find whatever concept you're supposed to present on in the study guide, and that will help shape how you prepare your presentation, or maybe how you prepare your quick click paths. I did want to show you, in case you haven't been in there, This is the study schedule. And so I aim to put about an hour or less worth of work every single day, again, just to keep that momentum going for you. Make sure you take a look at the notes on the right. I don't put them very often, but when I do, there's a reason for it. And then the presentation schedule is here, and the gray and white just splits the days so it's easy to see who's happening on what day. Again, Paulina and Brenda are going to shift to Wednesday. We'll shift Edith and Satish down to Monday. And with that, any questions, comments, concerns before we close up? Okay, then. I'll hang on the line till everybody's off. Have a great day, everybody. Unique, which for some of us, or maybe for all of us, means we're going to be crazy busy trying to wrap things up before the Thanksgiving holiday. But we will talk to everybody again on Wednesday morning. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
You guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Natalya.
Bye.